So let's get to what can our side do? What is something productive that is not vigilante violence that we can be doing? So when it comes to the results of the 2020 election, there's not really much the left can get excited about, even with the surprising results in Georgia. We staved off the worst outcome of a second Trump term, but Biden has made very clear that he has no intention of even entertaining the universal demands the left is for. But we did see some bright spots, especially when we look at ballot measures. The minimum wage hike in Florida has gotten a lot of attention, but I'm going to talk about a ballot measure victory that I think was even more significant for the left, and that is Proposition 208 in Arizona. So Proposition 208 raises taxes on the wealthiest Arizonians in order to dramatically increase funding for public education. Specifically, it will raise $940 million for public schools annually. And it does this by putting in place a 3.5% surcharge for income above $250,000 for individuals and $500,000 for households. So in other words, 99% of Arizonians will not see any increase in their taxes, even the majority of small business owners. And the movement for Proposition 208 has roots in the Red for Ed movement, if you remember that thing. And I know it seems like a very long time ago, but just 2 years ago, several states had massive teacher strikes for higher wages and more education funding. And Arizona was one of those states. And let's take a look at a clip from Arizona.
Yeah, Pat and Stella, take a look at all these people down Congress Street in downtown Tucson. We have covered a lot of protests here over the years. I'll tell you this much, this one feels the most festive. There are bands here, there are people laughing and cheering, but they say don't be confused. These teachers and their supporters say they are not going anywhere, and they want Governor Doug Ducey and other lawmakers in Phoenix to know that they mean business when it comes to getting the salary and classroom funding they feel they deserve. Now, joining us now is President of the Tucson Education Association, Jason Freed. Jason, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for joining us.
What's the message that you and these teachers want to send to Governor Ducey tonight?
We are tired of being last. Arizonans deserve better. Our kids deserve better. He has shortchanged us by $1.1 billion, and we're tired of it.
We're seeing stickers and signs here in downtown that say, I don't want to strike, but I will. Is there talk of a teacher strike in Arizona right now?
There's talk of everything. What there's talk of is getting our community to be involved in this, because we know our community values the education that our kids are receiving. We've got to do better. Arizonans deserve to be first.
The legislative session ends in a couple of weeks now. What's coming between now and then so you guys can make your message heard? Are you hoping for real legislative action?
What we need to stop having the insults. A 1.08% is not going to move the needle. We need the governor, we need the legislature to make a serious financial commitment, and we can't talk about some other day today.
So they eventually did go on strike, and they made some really impressive wins. Teachers won a 20% pay increase spread out over multiple years and partially restored $400 million in education spending that was previously cut. The strike was an explosion of anger and frustration that had been building for a long time. Between 2000 and 2018, teacher salaries had decreased at a rate of 3.5% per year. The number of teachers in the state has decreased by 1.5% per year. And the student-teacher ratio had increased by almost 2% yearly. So in other words, lower wages, larger class sizes, less funding, and higher teacher turnover. And the 2008 recession was used as an excuse to accelerate the cuts, despite the fact that the economy in Arizona was actually growing during much of this time. More than $2 billion was cut from education in Arizona in the last 10 years. But even with the wins of the teacher strike, it's not anywhere close to restoring all the cuts that have been made over the last 20 years. This is where Proposition 208 comes in. It would begin to reverse the corporate welfare that has existed for so long in the state. And by corporate welfare, I mean like when in 2011, corporations got another round of tax cuts, and the fact that 74% of Arizona corporations pay $50 or less in state income taxes. And to no one's surprise, the Arizona Chamber of Commerce is, of course, leading the charge, or they led the charge, against raising taxes on the wealthiest. Let's look at some of their talking points.
We all support increased funding for education.
But Glenn Hammer, president and CEO of the Arizona Chamber of Commerce, does not think Prop 208 is the right way to go about it.
This is the Small Business Destruction Act. Over half of the filers hit by this are small businesses, and these businesses employ about 58% of our state's private sector employees.
The state still has not recovered the nearly 140,000 jobs lost since the pandemic hit. And Hammer claims that slapping the rich with a higher tax bill will make an economic recovery that much harder.
Let's look at how this will actually affect small businesses and even very affluent individuals. So as you see, the average income of small business owners is $49,000 per year, and they will see no increase in their taxes from Proposition 208. Even dentists and lawyers don't have anything to worry about. Another charge is that there is no accountability for where this money goes, no plan for how this will actually translate to improving the quality of education. Again, that's nonsense. The movement published a detailed outline of how this money will be used, and as you can see there, where the money is going, what it's used for, how that's going to improve education. So activists in Arizona, they organized phone banks, virtual house parties, petition drives, and education campaigns. They built a powerful coalition that included the Arizona AFL-CIO, the United Food and Commercial Workers, Arizona Educators Association, Arizona Pipe Trades, Arizona Firefighters, Parent Teachers Association, and most importantly, they won. I think the left should seriously consider pursuing tax-the-rich ballot initiatives in the future. We need to figure out how to translate victories on the shop floor and in the labor movement into the legislative and electoral arena. Proposition 208 is a great example of that. And I think many on the left feel a sense of demoralization and loss of direction since the end of the Bernie campaign. But I think it's time now to stop licking our wounds and throw ourselves into the fight against austerity and taking back the wealth that workers have collectively created. These tax-rich ballot initiatives have strategic and organizational values. And I'll start with this strategic. We're facing a deep post-COVID economic recession, and states and cities are already talking about austerity. And let's be clear, by austerity, we mean mass layoffs, destroying public sector unions, cuts to public school funding, cuts to public transit and all kinds of public services, and a further decline of our infrastructure. And let's take a step back and think, what is our task as socialists or even progressives? We want to unite the broadest coalition of working people possible to take on the rich and democratize society. Austerity will affect all working people, and engaging in this work helps us build this coalition. These kind of tax-rich ballot drives help polarize politics along class lines and identify local corporate villains. You can target behemoths like Comcast, Amazon, and Walmart and connect how corporate power negatively affects people's everyday lives. These campaigns also help us cultivate the allies that we want. All kinds of public sector unions and community organizations will have an interest in funding public services. Especially as the situation becomes more desperate for public workers, these unions may be looking to form alliances they ordinarily may not seek out. And you hear a lot that organizations on the left are not connected enough and rooted in working class communities, and this is in many ways true. These kind of ballot initiatives are an opportunity to engage with and mobilize all kinds of communities to challenge the logic of austerity and neoliberal economics. And so on the organizational front, I'm a DSA member, so I'm kind of thinking with a DSA hat on, but this could apply to any left or progressive organization. Many people are thinking now, what do organizations like DSA do in the post-Bernie moment? What kind of non-electoral work can the left do? These groups are experiencing a massive influx of new members and are dealing with the problem of what to have these members doing. How do we keep them active and engaged? These kind of ballot initiatives help people develop certain organizing and canvassing skills. It's also a good way to use the infrastructure organizations have built. Many DSA chapters have built up fantastic canvassing structures they've used to elect candidates or campaign on issues like Medicare for All. Or if you don't have this infrastructure yet, you could build it up through a ballot campaign. Just imagine if a group like DSA combined its canvassing infrastructure with a union like Unite Here that did amazing voter turnout during the election on a campaign to tax the rich. That's a very powerful alliance and just the kind of common work that we want to be doing with our allies. And we need to pursue campaigns that are ambitious but also winnable so that working people can experience the kind of impact left-wing policies have on their everyday lives. And like Arizona has shown us, campaigns to tax the rich to fund public services are both possible and winnable and popular. To be clear, I'm not saying this is some kind of silver bullet that will suddenly solve all of the left's problems. Some states have laws and some cities have laws that make ballot initiatives toothless and ineffective, or maybe groups in a certain area already have big campaigns on other issues that are in the works. but it is one tool in our toolbox we can use to increase our power in society beyond electoral politics. And I'll end by addressing the common right-wing talking point that, you just can't throw the money at the problem of education. You throw money at it, that won't solve the real issues. So let's be very clear about why this revenue is needed and what it will be used for. I teach in the school district of Philadelphia, and about 5 or 6 years ago, we faced a round of brutal budget cuts that left many schools without on-duty nurses. 2 students died in one school year from asthma attacks that could have been saved if there was an on-duty nurse. Many of our buildings are 80, 90, 100 years old. They're infested with mold, lead, and asbestos. Just last year, 2 schools had to be relocated in the Philadelphia district because of the asbestos problem. A few years ago, a roof of a high school caved in after heavy rain. My first year teaching, I was in a building where we had to put out buckets whenever it rained to catch water. And it's not uncommon for there to be 40 students or more in a classroom. This has become the norm for urban and rural school districts across the country. Just imagine adding another wave of austerity and funding cuts onto our present conditions. So we're really talking about a crisis situation and even a life and death situation for public school students. And taxing the rich is the only way to get out of this crisis. And I'm glad Arizona has showed us the way that this is possible. And I think this is something we should really take up seriously in the future. I don't know what you think, Jen. I'll throw it to you. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. We're novices, guys. No, I really appreciated that because, I think that, as you said, in the last election, there were quite a few ballot initiatives that were sort of unexpected hits, right? Like Arizona, like you mentioned, Colorado had a paid leave initiative that passed. You mentioned Florida, a supermajority of voters passed a $15 minimum wage. And you mentioned this as well, but tax the rich initiatives are actually really popular. I think that, even Republicans consistently poll at like 45%, 55% who say that they actually support higher taxes on corporations and the wealthy. So I know you've said before, like, taxing the rich like isn't as sexy as some other kind of campaigns that we frequently hear about, but it's popular, and I think that's really important. So I guess I have sort of one follow-up question for you, and we can bring on Jane soon to talk about this as well. But on the subject of ballot measures, so as you were saying, there were some hits, but there were also some misses, right? Like the big one is in California, Proposition 22, which was the gig workers bill that classified rideshare and delivery app workers as independent contractors rather than employees, which of course strips them of a lot of important labor protections. And I think in Illinois, there was a tax the rich ballot measure that did not pass. Partly because there was this like evil Illinois billionaire who just poured tons of money into fighting that ballot measure. So I guess I don't know if there's like a question there, but like it just kind of seems like dangerous, Or
yeah, I mean, and again, like I said, I don't see this as some kind of like silver bullet, right. And also in California, and I'm eager to get Jane on to ask her about that, but that failed as well. Now I think some of these you might have to go case by case. I did hear in California that with COVID, like they couldn't do the organizing that they would have done and needed to do to really break through all the money. And with Proposition 22, like we know with any of these things, the Chamber of Commerce, the business elite, they're going to throw in as much money and resources as possible. And I think that speaks to the only way to win these things is really to organize. And I see a lot of potential, keyword being potential, in these areas where, maybe some progressive organizations already have a robust canvassing infrastructure they've already used. You combine that with some unions that are experienced with, really doing heavy turnout. I see a potential powerful alliance there. But yeah, I mean, I think you're right to bring that up. Again, there were failures of this stuff in the election. But hopefully people have learned from, whatever went wrong in these campaigns.
I think the thing that to me is most interesting about ballot measures is they often seem to do well in red or purple states, right? Like, so
Right.
Arizona
And
for one. I know I've
also,
talked about this
yeah.
on the show before, so people are probably sick of it, but Idaho is a deep red state that passed a Medicaid expansion a few years ago. And then, of course, Florida sort of famously voted for Trump, but passed the $15 minimum wage ballot measure. So,
Right. And also, think about how, increasingly things are polarized so much partisan lines. But when
exactly.
you take out, I think for many people, like if they have the Democrat next to their name, forget it. I don't even want to hear your next sentence. But if you take that out of the equation and focus on the issues, I'm a little bit more optimistic about that. And I think that's another powerful thing, is that it can possibly cut through this like heavily partisan environment. You're not talking about a candidate, a personality, or even a party. You're talking about, what is the issue?
Right. Literally just the issue.
Right.
Yeah.